Okay, well, it is 8:01, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We are recording this webinar, and it will be posted at the latest by Friday. Our goal is to get it out, but get it posted by end of day tomorrow. Welcome, everyone. My name is Brett Gorman. I am the Director of High Performance Pathways for USRowing. I am very pleased to be joined with my co-host, Mr. Chris Chase. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself to the group?
Well, I'm Chris Chase and Director of Sport Development.
Great. And between Chris and I, we represent the USRowing leadership that will be responsible for all of our 2024 camps that are below the senior team Olympic level. So Pathways encompasses the road to the Olympic team, or really just the road to continue in rowing. But a lot of times when people think about it, they think about it in terms of the Olympic team. But, one of the goals of this webinar is to explain how Pathways is really for everyone who wants to continue in the sport. We will be highlighting our U19 and U23 and para camps today on this webinar, but really explaining the why behind Pathways and what it is and why is it different, because it is different than previous programs and the previous camp system that we have had before. Couple disclaimers. We do have a lot of material to get through tonight. We have 40 slides, so you'll see the numbers as we start ticking through, but there are 40 total slides. I do anticipate that we will have some time for questions at the end. I kindly ask that all questions go to the Q&A function. We will not be utilizing the chat tonight, and I ask that if anybody does have the ability to see the chat, that they please not use it. We're going to stick to the Q&A, and any questions that we don't get to at the end, we are going to end promptly at 9 o'clock. And any questions that we don't get to, we will either address on one of our future Pathways webinars or via a follow-up email to the group. But I'm going to be asking Chris to keep an eye on that Q&A as we go, and to also help me with answering some of those questions as we go. All right, Chris, are we ready? Okay. One other thing I want to say is that, a lot of Pathways has to do with our chief high performance officer, Josie Verdonschot, who was involved in the creation of this webinar. Unfortunately for us, Josie is currently on a plane back to Europe for his brother's 70th birthday and is unable to be on with us live. But we have recorded Josie. We have an avatar. I guess it's actually him, but we have some videos that Josie pre-recorded to make sure that you all are fully aware of his involvement in this program and his views of why it's important. Okay. Chris, anything else before I dive in?
No, let's get to it.
Let's do it. This is very exciting. All right. And Chris, just please let me know if anything doesn't look right. And then going. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to be spending a good amount of time talking about Pathways as a whole, holistically, the whole program, and why it is different from what we've previously had at USRowing in relation to our pathway to senior Olympic team. The most important part, when Chris and I got together 2 weeks ago to first start talking about this webinar and putting the slides together, it was, what do we want to get across? And it was the why. Why is this important? Why is it different? We will go into 2024 camp details. We have a lot to share. We also have some dates to share with you for when more information will be coming. We'll talk about next steps and things that are coming up relatively quickly. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have time at the end for a Q&A. All right, overview. All right, so there is our fearless leader, Josie, right there. And really the biggest takeaway that I really want everyone to leave here with is that Pathways is directly coming from Josie, from the high performance team, and that we want to apply it to every level of everything we do at USRowing. And that's multifaceted, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get going, but historically we've not had that. Is particularly at the U19 level, historically, U19 has kind of functioned as its own entity. And actually, Chris, I'm going to put you on the spot because you've been involved in the U19 team and all those camps that go along with that for years. Do you want to say a couple things about some of the differences that people are going to be seeing?
Well, I think the biggest difference is that it'd be from start to finish. Whenever an athlete wants to be part of the pathway, they'll realize that it continues all the way through U23 into the senior team, and that we have a top-down set of eyes looking at all the steps along the way so that it is one complete pathway. I think, over the years, everybody sort of worked on their own aspects of this, and so it was a little bit disjointed in the communication and the messaging wasn't the same. And now it's, from Yoshi's perspective, He wants to see the entry level, and he wants to see the progress of every person and every part of the system all the way through the pathway. So I think how it's all together now is probably the biggest change. And also knowing that much of what you're about to say and all the things that we've been working on together, Brett, are being through Yossi. And so he is vested in this. And I think that's a major change for everybody.
And I think one of the great benefits we're getting from Yossi is his experience with other federations. So for those of you that are unaware, before coming to USA, Yossi was the chief high performance director. I'm sure they called it something different for the Netherlands. And he also served in that role for Italy, two very successful rowing nations. And so he brings that perspective. And I think one of the things that I'm really starting to appreciate about Yossi is how quickly he's realizing there are elements of those systems that we can strive to implement, but we also have a pretty special and unique system that we can maximize as well. And how do we combine those two things? Chris, this slide's you. Do you want to talk to this one?
Sure. When we began the relationship with ODP, I think we confused a lot of people, and sometimes I think we confused ourselves. ODP is a program that the USOP sponsors in all Olympic sports. So it's not just like rowing has ODP. My son played soccer and they have ODP, and volleyball has ODP.
And for those who don't know, Chris, what does ODP stand for?
Olympic Development Program. So the ODP is something that is bestowed upon an Olympic sport by the USOPC. So if you are an Olympic sport under the umbrella, then you are allowed to create ODP camps, and they are for the most part, and for almost every sport that I know of, it is a development pathway. It's a development program, right? And so we first applied it, and I think it became synonymous with like one part of our camp system. It became synonymous with the youngest in the base of the pyramid. ODP is actually, just so we're clarifying it, we're going to use pathways and ODP as a system, as basically synonymously. So ODP, the way that we intend to use it moving forward, is it does not reflect any one of the camps or any part of the pathway. It is, in essence, the pathway, as it is in almost any other Olympic sport. So ODP is the whole pathway, the whole pipeline of athlete experience as they move from entry level all the way through.
Great. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Well, if you talk about pathways, it's just how to look at getting from the level of somebody who makes his first acquaintance with rowing and then working his or her way up to the higher ranks or to an older age. Because in the end, if you look at rowing, it can be for fun, but some people have the ambition to row internationally. So we need to create a pathway from the first steps in rowing, having fun and enjoy, to learn to compete, to learn to row and to race, and then learn to what is necessary at the highest level.
Hey, Brett, do you mind if I really quickly address the USOPC, United States Olympic and Para Committee? In case anybody didn't know what USOPC stood for, it is the umbrella organization that oversees any and all Olympic sports.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And so that was direct from Yossi himself on the mission of Pathways. And on our next slide, just to summarize it a little bit, we're trying to, how are we providing developmentally appropriate training at every level? And how are we, being successful at an international level by having a very athlete-centered approach, being transparent and collaborating and educating while we're moving athletes up the pathway. So how are we going to do that? I think so. For those of you that may have seen, we had a video go out via social media. We also had a press release that went out the Tuesday before Head of the Charles, so it may have gotten lost in the Head of the Charles noise that was happening that week that outlined pathways. And that press release is still available on USRowing website if you'd like to take a look at it. But we identified 4 tenets of pathways that we want to stay true to as we're developing this system. So I just said build systems, building sustainable systems, prioritizing communication and transparency. Education will be a key part of the pathway for both athletes and coaches alike. I think we've always talked about educating coaches at USRowing. We have a pretty robust certification program for coaches, but we're really starting to also go to direct athlete communication and education, which is really exciting. And then developing athletes, coaches, and high performance training partners. So this webinar is very U19 and U23 heavy. However, we do plan to have a future webinar talking more about post-collegiate HP clubs. And actually, Chris, that reminds me, I completely forgot to do our poll. I completely forgot. So we have a little poll because we want to get an idea of who's joining us this evening. We have over 200 people on here right now. So I'm going to launch this poll, if it will let me relaunch it. Yep. Chris, let me know when it comes up.
It's up now, Brett.
Great. Great. Yeah. So, and you can click more than one because we recognize that people might be multiple stakeholders. I'm a coxswain, but I'm a U19 athlete. I'm a coach, but I'm also a parent, whatever that is. So you go ahead and click as many. Oh, it's dancing. It's starting to go. This is exciting. But yeah, you click as many as are relevant to you and speak to you. Great.
Brett, it's pretty exciting because we have so many people on here, as this chart showing. We also have Olympic coaches from other countries. We have our board members. We have Amanda
I
Krause,
can't see who's here. Oh, that's
our
fun.
CEO, Amanda Krause is on here. So this is generating a lot of people's interest.
Very cool.
Yeah, it is really cool.
All
And
right.
yes, the question was, will we be addressing toxins? Of course. They're every bit a part of
See,
our
Coxon's
system.
listed up there first because we knew we'd be hearing from them right away. All right, well, I'm going to end the poll in 3, 2, 1. Great. I'm going to share it. I'm going to let everyone see who all's here. Just so you're aware, we've got, a healthy amount of coxswains, U19 athletes, U19 parents. There could be some overlap here. I'm curious, maybe I should have specified, do we have U23 coxswains or U19 coxswains? Very cool. And awesome. Great. This is actually what I very much expected, but it's good. It's good to see. All right. And I'm going to, Chris, let me know if the poll has disappeared now from your screen. All good. Are we good to continue? All right. Thank you all for doing that. We appreciate getting some feedback from, who's showing up at these events that we hold. All right. We're going to get a little bit more into these tenets and give some examples. So in other words, I went backwards. Apologies, everybody. Great. So how are we going to action these things? Like, those are very pretty words. And I think if for those of you that read the press release, it reads like, something that, someone designs in a vacuum. What is the real world, the practical application? How are we actually going to be doing those things? So we're going to be giving you some examples. Wow. Sorry. It keeps going backwards. There we go. All right. Building sustainable systems. These 3 icons are speaking specifically to athletes, but coaches are also a part of this, as I'll mention again and again. So creating reliable information that we can go off, really a centralized database. So something I'll be talking about a little bit later is our new system within the USRowing member portal, where we now have the ability to have athlete portals as well. And so for every single USRowing member, when they log into their member account and they go to edit profile, they will see an option to now fill out an athlete profile. Part of that is also an option to opt in to the Pathways program. Say, yes, I want us to receive information about these programs. And we've never had that before, where athletes can directly get their data to USRowing. We've always used jot forms, Google spreadsheets, things like that, where athletes have to continually fill out their data again and again and again. I'm going to an ID camp, I need to fill out a form. I'm going to selection camp, I need to fill out a form. I'm going to YDC youth development camp, I'm filling out a form. Forms. Now it's all going to live in the member portal, which is great. And you can update it. And when you update it, it gets timestamped. So I can see that an athlete rowing in, say, Chicago, that they did a 2K in 2022. This month, this is how fast they went. And then 6 months later, this is what they're doing. So that's going to allow us to, number one, get out of what I'll call, and forgive the swear word, spreadsheet hell in a lot of ways. It's going to allow us to move on from that and have a reliable source of data where everybody has access to enter in their own data, which is really cool. And I'll speak to that a little bit later. Communication and transparency. This webinar is a key example of ways that we want to communicate with our stakeholders more consistently earlier. That's a big thing. Historically, we kind of operate on a yearly basis, and oftentimes we're not planning. Maybe we're starting to plan camps at this stage. We're not making announcements until well into the new year. Applications are due, by end of spring, maybe, but we always feel really rushed. So one of the things that Chris and I really wanted to prioritize was setting camps earlier, setting deadlines earlier, letting people know what's happening earlier, and using multiple ways to let people know. I think this webinar is a perfect example of how we can publicize things, because it seems like a lot of people knew about it. We had a lot of registrants, a lot of interest. We will be recording this and posting it on the website, because a lot of people I know weren't able to join us live. And social media posts. There was a social media video. There was the press release that went out before Charles that said this webinar was coming. We've been talking about it for a while. So we're going to continue to do that with the goal of not having any surprises, that people know what's coming. Education through information sharing. This is something where I'm super grateful we have Yosi. He is more than willing to share what he's doing at the highest level and help us interpret what we should be doing at those other levels of the pathway. So you're going to be hearing from him a lot more in terms of what he's going to be able to provide for what's happening with his training groups and with the Olympic training pool. We'll be doing specific webinars targeting different issues. This year, Yosi is very much going to be available, but especially after the Olympics in Paris, we have a lot of plans with Yosi for monthly calls where we're going to put him in front of our stakeholders much, much more. Obviously, he's got a pretty big job to do coming up this summer in Paris with our Olympic team. We qualified 9 boats for the Olympics at the World Championships in September, which is really amazing. And we're going to be trying to qualify some more at the final qualification regatta this summer. National team best practices, learning and development. That's the education arm of USRowing. We have a wonderful program on there right now that's targeting member organizations and how they can improve and run better clubs and run better programs. Athlete education, that is also where that's going to be. Our current athlete courses are coxswain course. Coxswains, there are lots of coxswains on this webinar. I highly recommend our athlete coxswain course. Ask it for Christmas for mom and dad. There is a fee. It is $250, but an amazing course. And all future athlete courses will also be on the launch. Okay, how are we creating year-round engagement? Like when we're talking about developing athletes and coaches and working with our high performance training centers, that needs to be a 365-day job. It can't just be, oh, it's March. It's time to start applying and getting ready for camps. Now we have summer and then it's over. It's something that we want to have going throughout the year. Hence why we're going to be having more webinars. What's great about the athlete data in the member portal now is that it's going to allow us to pull that data to know who are the stakeholders who are interested in pathways, who wants to know about a webinar we're having on altitude training, who wants to know about an event that's specific for coxswains. And by having that data and being able to pull those groups right away, we're not relying on people having to go and sign up for things. We can bring those opportunities to you with our newsletters, our special targeted emails. So that's something that we're definitely going to be doing. With coaches, making sure that we're having clear roles and responsibilities outlined. Applications for all of our summer coaching positions that aren't filled yet will be by December 20th. And those will have not just apply, but will outline what roles we're looking for, what values we're looking for, and what the role really is about, as opposed to just saying coach. Coach can encompass a lot of different things. So we want to get more specific and make sure that everyone understands what they're signing up for.
For anybody who tried to follow me since I arrived in the United States, one of the first things I said was, it's not going to be a revolution. Because in the end, it doesn't help to try and change everything at one time. It's an evolution of a system. We've got new ideas, we've got a bright staff, we've got good people, but what we have to do is to involve you, our stakeholders, and develop the system that will work in the United States. So don't sit back and wait for the solutions. Help us and evaluate so we make the right steps. We develop the best system in the world for the best country in the world.
Thank you, Yosi. Yep, great. Yeah, I think that was one of the things that I definitely wanted Yosi to address. And it's something, as director of this program, it's a personal tenet of mine that we're going to do things right, though they might not be fast. And you'll see as we go through these presentations, we have a lot to share with you in terms of what's coming for 2024. A lot of dates, a lot of exciting things happen. We also have some areas where we're going to be really transparent, TBD. We don't know yet, but we're always trying to provide dates for when that information will become available. All right. We don't want to promise things and say, oh yeah, it's coming. Here it comes. We want to be concrete. This is when it's coming. And if we don't know right now, here's when we will know by. So again, I don't think Yosi necessarily needs translation. I think he's very, very clear in how he speaks. But yeah, change takes time. And we have staff that are very passionate about this. We have great ideas, but we can't do it alone. And we're inviting as many people as possible to get involved with the pathway. There will be surveys, there will be ways to get involved. Of course, if you're interested in being a coach, coming to one of our camps, that's a great way to get involved. But we need everyone to contribute. And of course, because we all want the best system that the US can have. Nope, it does not want to advance. There we go. All right. Why is it important?
If you talk about the American system, it's kind of unique. I mean, there's a large crowd of youth rowing. People are really into rowing and have big clubs. On the other hand, if you compare it to different systems, even small countries, focus is a bit different because it's in general on individual development. It's if there's not a team of 50 people, then when you're on your own, you learn how to row in a single, and that might be beneficial. So if you look at it from our side, we have to be clever and have to find a way how to integrate small boat rowing, how to integrate focusing on the individual together with the huge number of people, because in the end, having more people, probably we'll find more people of the right standard. So what we have to be is clever and take the good points of what maybe smaller countries are doing and integrate that in our system.
Thank you, Yosi. Yeah, so again, I love how he talks about how it is unique and it is different, and there are some great things. I'm here in Princeton right now. We have a speed order coming up this weekend for those that are looking to be on the Olympic team in Paris. And I'm going out on the launch and spending some time with Yosi before he left, and some of our other coaches. And one of our other coaches, Isabel Jacobs, who is our sculling coach. She and I were in the launch, and she was saying, the US has so much going for it, and we just have to tap into it, which I really, really appreciated. Chris, I would love to hear some of your thoughts on this, because this is as we said before, you've been involved in the youth level for so long, and have been saying for years, at least ever since you and I have been working together at USRowing, about how much we need to kind of start doing some of the things they're doing in Europe in relation to small boats. And I know we're going to be talking about the specific camps that are going to be targeting those areas, but would you like to say a couple words to this?
Well, how provocative do you want me to be, Brett? Do you want me to talk about SDC, or wait till we get to it?
I think I'm kind of looking at the American development model and your work that you've done there, and how we're, going to be integrating some of the things Yosi is talking about at our various levels of camps.
Well, I think, being part of the junior system for virtually all of my 30 years, what do we see is we don't move boats like, say, the Europeans do. We row bigger boats, and I think that we lose some of the feel of the water and the ability to move the bow. I also think that we have to get a more cohesive unit of how we train our juniors across the country. I think we've got to educate a lot better on everything from appropriate lifting to appropriate volume. I think we do too much volume as a country. We think more is better. If you're asking me how we're going to tie into junior system, I think that we have to educate a lot more people to send up athletes that are ready to go, that can move boats, that are going to be healthy, aren't going to have overuse injuries, aren't going to have burnout. And we've got a lot to do to make those ends meet. And so we'll find we'll be adjusting the camps to make sure that they are appropriate in those ways.
And I think you bring up a good point about, that we have to do at USRowing. It's on us to communicate those things. And I think that it's, I've definitely been a coach at the level where it's like, oh, just more of a good thing, more, keep going. And I think, we're looking forward to bringing some of that education to coaches, to athletes, to parents. What should their athletes be doing to make sure that we're going to keep them in the sport for the long haul, which is really what we're talking about. Oh, it keeps going the wrong way. All right, so we're going to get into some 2024 camps. And one of the first things I want to talk about, I mentioned the athlete profile earlier, that data that's always going to be there, that athletes please, keep that up to date. That just launched a week and a half ago, and we're starting to see people fill it out. It's going to take a little bit of a learning curve for people to get used to going in there, but super important. We're also going to be running all of our camp applications through there. So we actually just recently launched the first camp application through the member portal. It's for our U19 high performance winter camps. which I will talk in a couple slides from now. And it's actually within the member portal. And because every camp is going to have additional questions beyond what we're asking for in that athlete profile. The athlete profile is your stats. It's your height and your weight. What side do you row? Do you scull? Are you a coxswain? It's going to ask about, yes, your 2K and your 6K. We want that. It also has the option to add in a 1 minute and some 10-second max tests. We want as much data as you can, and we want you to keep that updated as much as possible. But for every camp, there's always going to be a couple other questions we need to ask. So we have the ability to put those applications directly in there, which is really amazing. So to update your profile, very simple, log into your USRowing account, go to the athlete profile and fill that in. And any applications that you qualify for example, if you're a U19 athlete and you log in right now, you will be able to see that U19 HP camp. When I log into my profile, it does not show that camp because I unfortunately am no longer under the age of 19 and I'm not eligible to go to HP Winter Camp, which is sad because it's going to be really fun. Well, I'll be there as a coach, but more on that in a minute.
Hey, Brett, do you mind if I say something real quick? I've had 5 questions in a row now about everything from training center partnerships that USRowing has had in the past with programs around the country to college coaches and communication from the top down, from high performance, from Yossi and so on. So I guess what we should say is there's enough here that these questions are asking that I think are in a different vein. And I think that what we should commit to right now is that you and I and Yossi, when he gets back, and Amanda, will have we might just have to have a different webinar to answer some of those questions, right?
These is specific to HP clubs.
They're germane to all of this, but they're very specific about financial grants towards training center partnerships and who gets designated as such, and how do we work better directly with college coaches, and how do we create that communication path, that there's another pathway. How do we create the communication structure for colleges? So I guess what I'm saying to everybody who's asking these questions in this vein, I wrote them all down and who asked them, and I will share that information with Brett after this webinar, and we will share with Amanda and with Yossi and all of the powers that be, and find a way to get more direct answers to those kinds of questions. So as you keep putting in the Q&A, I'm writing most of you privately, but I am taking it down, and we will proceed with the questions that you're asking. So I'm just letting you know that that.
Thanks, Chris. And I think I have on a slide here the future webinars we have coming up. We have a U19 and a U23 specific one scheduled, but I also have on there that we're going to be scheduling one specific to HP clubs as well. Okay. One thing that a lot of people ask about in relation to our camps are scholarship opportunities. So I wanted to make sure before we got into the specific camps that we address that. Chris and I have been working closely with our community engagement team on this, and and through Yossi's budget as well, we do have a budget for scholarships. Within every application for every camp, there will always be a question relating to scholarship and a form to fill out if financial aid is something that you need in order to attend that camp. So for example, the HP Winter Camp that's live right now, that application, the last 2 questions or the last 2 sections of that speak to the scholarship opportunities. How do you qualify? Need-based, they're all need-based aids, so need-based aid grants. And that is included in all of them. I'm sure that's a question, if we haven't already gotten it, Chris, that will be coming through. Right. The other one that I'm sure has already coming or will come is the coxswain selection process. So this is a key area that we are looking to have consistency across all areas of USRowing, from U23, U19, YDC, all the layers of the camps that we offer, the high performance winter camp that's coming first up in 2024. And so when you go to fill out that HP winter camp, as U19 athletes, and this will be the same for our other camps, it's going to ask you for a maximum 2-minute race recording. Why only 2 minutes? Chris, can you please tell me how many coxswain recordings you received for 2023 camps?
Well, the answer was for 10 slots, we had 227 coxswains apply, which was roughly 20 to 25% of all the applicants were coxswains. And then we were asking for them to apply in February. But then as soon as the racing season started, to their credit, the coxswains were like, oh, I should send in this weekend's piece, and then next weekend's piece, and then the weekend after that's piece. And so we had 227 coxswains, as well as them sending in multiple full pieces. And I mean, we're trying to build a system where we are transparent and saying that we're going to listen to your tapes, and it just got out of hand. It got out of hand quickly. So we're trying to mitigate that and send us your best stuff. Send us that.
Yes, 2 minutes. And so when we say race recording, it can be from, a race, a competition. It could also be from a race piece in practice. The one asterisk that I'm going to put on that is that you need to have other boats that you're calling off of. It cannot be a time trial piece. We want to hear how you're relaying information about another crew, as well as communicating to your crew what they need to hear. All right. So just I'll say it again. 2 minutes maximum. If it is longer than 2 minutes, we will not listen to it. It needs to be in a race environment that can be in practice or in a competition side by side. So to Chris's point about sending updated, wait to send your best stuff. Note when the application is due, when is the latest I can submit a recording, so that you know like what races or what opportunities you have coming up. Pick the best one and submit that. So that's the first element. The second element is we are asking this year for a coach nomination form. We have a form. So again, this is all on the HP Winter Camp as an example for our U19 athletes. It will be the same for U23 when we post those camps. As you go through that, coxswains, there's a section that's where you say I'm a coxswain, and it takes you to a different set of questions, and including in a place where you can put your recording, and then it takes you to a link to a form that your coach has to fill out. Now, that doesn't need to be filled out before you can fill out your application. Those happen independent of each other. We will match the name of the coxswain with the nomination form, because on that nomination form, we ask your coach to name you, to say what ranking on the team you currently are. There is also a space for them to write notes on that. For example, if you're the second coxswain, we want to know, why are you the second coxswain? Is it just because the first coxswain is older and more experienced? Why are they giving you that ranking? And then we ask them to assess you in a couple different skill areas for that. Okay, so we are asking your coaches to help us with this. So if you're interested in coming to camp, now's the time to get with your coach and say, this is coming. Like, I would love for you to nominate me and recommend me. What do I need to do that? If at this point they're not ready to do that, I think most coaches are more than willing to, but we're going to ask them for some specific information, and we may come back to them with follow-up questions. Chris, anything about that?
I would say be very careful what you send in, especially when it comes to appropriate language and appropriate phraseology. Look, we're not looking to have somebody who thinks that dropping F-bombs is what makes boats go fast, because it could also get you kicked out of any regatta in the blink of an eye. So if you're sending in stuff that is just filled with F-bombs, I'm not really sure that that's what makes the best coxswain or the best boat. So be very careful what you're sending us, because that says something else as well.
Thank you. Okay. We'll move on. Okay, so this is all of the camps that we are ready to talk about in a glance. We are going to get into each of these has its own slide that we will get into, but just so you can look at a glance. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to give you all the information that we have. And then we do have some TBDs, for example, ID camps for U23s. We are looking into possibly combining the U19 system with the U23 ID camps and making that available. But that's a lot of hosts that we have to talk to and coordinate with and make sure that they can handle capacity if they're also going to be receiving U23 athletes. So we are not ready to announce that yet. December 1st is our planned U19 ID camp release date. That's on a later slide. And as we have U23 ID options, we will for sure update. The number one way to get ID'd is to fill out your athlete profile within the USRowing member portal. That is the first step. And I'll talk about that again. I'm going to keep saying it. Athlete profile. Please fill it out. Pro tip, when you're putting in your 2K, please make sure that you put a 0 before the time, because it says on there the format we want it in. So we want, and this is just like a formatting with Regatta Central, who runs our database. So instead of, for example, 659.9 PR right here. So instead of writing 659.9 though, it's 0659.9. Okay. I went under 7 once. I got there. Went under once. Okay, great. One thing I also want to say, our director of high performance para coach, Ellen Minsner, asked me to mention that for that PR3 athletes, which that's our PR3-4, Cox 4 for the Paralympic Games, that those athletes that qualify for PR3 are eligible for all of our camps. They don't have to go to para-specific camps. They could be going to YDC, SDC, U23 selection camp, whatever camps that you're qualifying, your stats qualify you for, those athletes are totally eligible, and we want them to come. All right. I'll talk a little bit more about para camps as we go. Chris, anything on this slide before I move on? There's a lot on here.
Well, I think it's important. I mean, sometimes we use letters and they stand for longer things. The ID camps are identification. They're camps where we identify what athletes are showing up and what they have to offer and what level of camp is most appropriate for them. It's a filter where we assign an athlete's abilities to a camp to the level that's equal to their ability.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now we're going to get at each one of these a little bit more specifically. Let's see. So I keep mentioning these HP winter camps. I think number one, I'm very excited about them. We have not offered them before. This is a new offering that we're looking to, part of that 365-day engagement that I was talking about earlier. This is right there in that effort. We hope to have more of these and maybe even start them as early as December for 2024, for next year, for next fall. But so for this year, we are running 2 for U19 athletes, January 12th through 15th and February 2nd through 5th. And there's more information on the website now about these as well. And we'll continue to add more information about what that looks like. For example, like we are looking, so that's a Friday to Monday format for that January weekend. That is MLK. So Monday hopefully is a day off for a lot of athletes for that. But it's arriving midday Friday and leaving midday Monday for both of those camps. Who should be coming to this? Who should be applying to this? I mean, anybody who's under 19, if you want to apply, we want you to apply. Specifically, those that were on the 2023 World Championship team or the Kenemex team. So they were at selection camp last summer. They have already received automatic invites. So if you were on one of those 2 teams and you can make one of those 2 weekends, you are invited. But you need to go on and fill out the application, and then we will send you your acceptance letter. All right, great. Other target athletes. As selection development camp attendees from 2023. That was the camp that Chris was very involved directly on. So a lot of those athletes, we want to see those that are continuing to progress and move up the pathway, apply for this camp. And then of course, athletes that are on track to compete for slots for the 2024 selection camp that will determine boats going to the 2024 World Championships in St. Catharines, Ontario. Okay, so if selection camp is your goal, this is a great way to get seen. We have space for 120 athletes total. So that's 60 athletes per camp. We will be inviting, is it 3 coxswains per gender per camp? Chris, is that what we decided on? I believe 6 per, so 12 coxswains will be part of that group. Okay, so that's why we're including them in the application process. What are we doing there? One of the biggest things that I'm very excited about doing there is we're going to do some physiological testing. What is that? So at the Olympic senior team level, and most recently, the last 2 years, we've been doing at the U23 level as well, is a lactate step test. This is Yossi's protocol for establishing training zones. Now, it is not the same thing as doing a 2K or a 6K. It's a series of 4-minute steps where you're going up, you start at a very low wattage, and you go up every time. And what are we doing there? We are looking at heart rate. We are measuring perceived level of exertion, and we are also taking blood samples. Okay, we have Cam Casaglas, who's our director of sports sciences, will be administering this test. He and I have done it together multiple times, and we will be, it's a little prick on the earlobe, to get those blood lactate levels. And the most important thing that athletes will get from that is a clearer picture of exactly where they stand from a physiological standpoint. Where can they make the most improvements? What are the areas of training that they should be focusing on the most to get those improvements in the 2K they're looking for, to get those improvements on the 6K that they're looking for? This is what we do at the highest level, and we're bringing it all the way down to U19. Chris, you've been excited about this too. Any comments about that?
No, I think you did. I think you did a good job.
Oh, thank you.
Right there. Yep.
Yep. Small boat rowing. We will have some big boats there as well. I mentioned we're gonna have coxswains there, but the primary focus is going to be the small boat rowing. Chris has a huge fleet that, as we speak, is on a trailer and on our way. I believe sometime tomorrow we'll hit Oklahoma City and pick up a couple more boats, and then continue all the way down to Chula, where that equipment's going to live through the summer. So we have a lot. What are some of the boats that we have on there, Chris? What's coming to Chula?
We have 16 straight 4 quads, 14 pair doubles, and 10 singles right now. We have more being delivered later, but we'll be spending a lot of time skill acquisition, and that'll enhance some of the camps, all of the camps directly.
So just a couple quick notes, then we need to move on so we make sure we get through all the camps. Is that if you are a sculler, if you are looking to get to try out for the quad for 2024 under 19 national team, we would like scullers to target that first January camp. So we're saying scullers in the West Coast region, because we know on the West Coast racing starts a lot earlier for a lot of those West Coast teams. And then if you reside in the Central or Eastern region, we're looking for you to come in February. Now we will accept, we ask on the application for you to say your first choice, and then if you can make the other camp as well, because we want to try to fill all those slots. Okay, I've got the application period on there. Again, this will be recorded so people can come back. I'm going to move on because I want to make sure we're getting through everything. All right, our talent ID camp. This is one of those areas where more information is coming. As you can see, we have several sites that we run these U19 one-day open call ID camps. They're for anyone remotely interested in pathways and interested in attending one of the camps this summer. They want to dip their toe into the pathways and U19 team pool. All right, one day we run them across the country, similar formats for all. We will do, we'll be sharing more information on pathways. We will be talking about coach education and athlete education for that physiological testing that we're doing in Chula Vista. We'll be explaining more of that, what that is, what are things that we're going to be bringing to people. We will not run the lactate step test at the one-day ID camps. It's just too many people to get through, and it does take a fair amount of time. But we will also do some short distance testing. But there will be information on proper technique, biomechanics, functional movement, how we want to be moving our bodies as we go. And I apologize that we don't have those dates set. Our target date to release that is December 1st. Okay. We'll progress along. Selection camp. Okay, so this is the camp that's selecting athletes to go to Worlds. We're going back to Chula Vista for this camp. This summer is unique where it is the Mega World Championship. For those of you that don't know, every year there is a world championship. And typically in a non-Olympic year, the U19 championship is its own separate event. Then the U23 championship is its own separate event. And then there's the senior world championship. In the Olympic year, like we are entering in, we have the Olympic team going to Paris. And then instead of running those separate championships, World Rowing does one big championship. We call it Mega Worlds. And it includes U19, U23, and non-Olympic senior team events, because not every senior team event is an Olympic event. Example, lightweight pair, for example, is not an Olympic event, but they do run it at the World Championship. So that's going to be in St. Catharines, Ontario, and we'll be selecting boats to go to that, as well as going to the Canamax Regatta, which is our second, which is the next tier of competition for selection camp. And that is a competition with Canada and Mexico, and we'll be in Mexico City this summer, which is very, very exciting. We have some 2K standards up there for you to review. It's a great, we definitely are going to be introducing, if not driving home, HP training practices and how we're putting people on the pathway, not to just making the U19 team, but continuing on the system to U23 and beyond. Okay. Dates there. This is an important point. We are starting our selection camps for U19 and U23 on July 10th. Why July 10th? There's this big regatta that happens in England the previous weekend, the Henley Royal Regatta. And it's an amazing event. And we have a lot of teams now from the US. Every year, it seems like more teams are going to Henley, more college teams are going to Henley, more U19 youth teams are going to Henley. I myself have raced there. If you have the opportunity, yes, please do it. The benefit of an Olympic year like this is that Worlds is later. And so we can wait to start those selection camps. So if your team is planning or thinking about going to Henley, you can do both. You can do Henley and you can do camp. We will ask that on the application. We want to know what athletes are doing that so we can make sure that when they come back, they're ready to go. But that's a really important distinction and an important point. The other thing that's happening that same weekend as Henley are the U19 and U23 team trials, which I have a later slide to talk about that as well. So same thing, if athletes want to go to trials, they can go to trials. And if they don't qualify through trials, they can still come to camp. I will talk on that a little bit later because we are already at quarter till. Amazing. Amazing. Our next layer, Chris, I'm going to let you talk about this one because this is one of the camps that you have direct oversight over.
Sure. This is a camp that we've run, and basically somebody just asked this question: what's the difference between selection development and selection camp? Selection camp is the camp that will be hosted where the athletes that attend it will either go to Worlds or they will go to Canamex. Selection development are for the kids that were just on the fringe of being invited or not being invited to selection camp. And this camp traditionally has been where we would bring this camp, they would train, and then they would get ready for next year's selection camp. And at the end of it, we would go to clubs. It's a 1-month camp. And what we've realized is if we're going to develop better athletes, if we're going to spend time on developing boat movers, if we're going to develop better athletes, then we can't do development in 3 weeks and also be doing selection for what lineups we're going to go to club nationals. So the big change this year is one, we're moving it to Chula Vista, which for rowers is like Disney World, right? And the big changes are that we will spend, it'll be predominantly in all small boat seats. We will learn how to move boats. We will spend less time, almost no time trying to make lineups because it's really not what's important. And we will not go to club nationals with us. So if you're looking at filling out your resume by having more results at summer races, selection development's not going to be the camp for you. If you're looking to have incredible coaching and all small boat activities, and then at the end, Yossi's helping us define our end of camp experience by doing basically an in-house speed order where you will get ranked in pairs and singles and stuff, just much like the Germans and the Italians do. Yossi's helping us design that. That's what we will be doing from here on out at selection development camp. It won't be a racing camp looking to race at some summer race. It'll be trying to make each individual athlete much better than when they came. And this year, as Brett said, we have the unique opportunity to bring it to Chula Vista and 6 or 7 fully buoyed lanes over 3,000 meters and really work on this.
And Chris, there is also a connection between selection development and selection camp this year. Do you want to?
Yeah, and I think this is probably the most exciting thing you're going to hear about selection development. We have built in the ability that if you're a high performer, look, for most of the athletes, we see you on paper, right? We see some video every now and then, and we know a little bit about you, or your coach tells us how awesome you are. At this camp, if you turn out to be one of the higher performers and belong, you should have an opportunity to come to selection camp and maybe make a boat for Worlds. We'll ask you to stay, and we have built in scholarships into the camp that we also pay for it. So if Eric and Caitlin show up, or anybody, Yossi, Brett, anybody shows up and is like, why is that kid here? That athlete should be invited to selection camp and try for a boat for Worlds. You will get that invite on the spot, and you won't have to worry about paying for it or being registered for it. We will, if you can do it, you do it time-wise, we'll take care of the rest. So we don't want to leave anybody behind.
And I think something that's really important, I'm sure if I was an athlete right now, I'd be like, what do I do? Like, what's the standard? How do I get that invite? Like, if I'm going to come to selection development with the intention of I'm trying to earn one of those spots to go to the selection camp, how do I do it? And that is something that by December 20th, we will also post more information on what that looks like. Because again, it's not a selection camp, selection development. It's about skill acquisition. We will be doing probably some time trial pieces and small boats and going off of World's Best Time to assess what that standard needs to be. But we are going to be doing that, which is really exciting. And just to be clear, I know it was on the slide, but our head coaches for U19 this year returning, we have Eric Gerke from Oklahoma OKC Riversport, and Caitlin McLean will be our women's head coach. And we're very excited to have them back this coming summer. All right, we are going to need to start going through this a little quickly. I don't want to rush, but want to make sure we get to all of these slides. So Chris, would you speak about a little bit about YDC?
Yes, much like selection development, YDC is going to be centered around trying to get kids to access to all different kinds of boats, all different sizes, rowboat sides, learn how to scull if you've never sculled before. If you've never been in a single, by the end of camp, be in a single. These are 2-week camps. These are where selection development last year averaged between 16 and 17 years old. Youth development is generally a little younger than that average wise. We have a lot of 16-year-olds and some 17-year-olds. But if you've never been in a single, the goal is to get you in a single. If you've never rowed another side, which you should all be rowing both sides and not just remember, if you can row both sides, you get 8 shots at the 8, not 4. So sorry for the soapbox. But this camp is based on, driving a passion for the sport, a love for it, having fun. They do a lot of activities. They do, not whitewater rafting like crazy river rafting, but they do things like that, go to a baseball game. So they have a lot of fun where it's trying to drive a love for the sport. And it's also making connections. We did a survey, and the biggest thing that came out of the survey is that the athletes thought that their exposure to athletes from across the country in other places exposed them to rowing at a much higher level. And they made connections, they made friendships. They realized that they weren't just the nerdy rowing guys and girls at their home small club, that rowing is actually pretty big in America and it's all over. So,
Chris, I'm gonna
again,
have to cut you off. I'm gonna have to cut you off.
Yep, go for it. Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As mentioned, on December 20th, we are going to be doing a in-depth, it's called a closer look at U19 for pathways. So we will get into this a lot more for that follow-up webinar. We're going to move to U23. So our selection camp, this is the earliest, I believe, that we have ever set our under 23 camps, which is really exciting because it allows us to focus on some of the other layers while also striving to make sure that the U23 experience is going to be a great one this summer. So again, similar to U19 team, these are for athletes that are going to be competing at the World Championships, born in 2002 and later to be U23 eligible. Couple ERG standards, select world's crews, assemble the top, I often refer to it as the collegiate all-star team. And then, of course, supporting those athletes and putting them on the path to senior team. Big goals. Dates and locations, as I mentioned before, not starting until after that Henley Royal Regatta and trials date. So we'll get started on July 10th. The men's sweep, women's sweep, and women's quad will all be run out of Dartmouth, out of Hanover, New Hampshire. Very exciting. And our men's quad has been and will continue to be at Conshohocken, Pennsylvania, just outside of Philly. Our head women's coach will be Sarah Trowbridge from Oklahoma, but she will be running that camp out of Dartmouth with John Graves, who is listed as an assistant, but will be coaching the women's quad. And those camps are going to be run very much one and the same together. Okay. For the men, for our head men's sweep coach, we have Wyatt Allen, the Dartmouth head coach, who has coached U23s before and returning. He himself, Olympic gold medalist in the 04 games, collegiate walk-on at the University of Virginia. So super excited to have Wyatt back. And then Coach Craig Hoffman at Conshohocken Rowing Center will return to coach the men's quad this summer. Okay. We will proceed on. All right. Now this I'm really excited about because I've always felt that we've had a bit of a gap between the U19 team and U23 team. That's a big jump. It's a big jump to make. For the last 2 years, we have run a women's, selection development camp. The first year, Chris, we ran it down with all your other camps that you were running down in Jacksonville, Florida. And then last summer, Grace Latz and head coach Kit Bennett ran it out of the Washtenaw Rowing Center in Ann Arbor. And it was a massive success. They then went to Summer Nationals in Ohio. I had a great experience with those athletes, great results, but also similar to what Chris was talking about with that small boat development and skill acquisition, that is the focus of this camp, not necessarily a racing camp. So we're very excited that we're going to be bringing a men's camp this summer as well. The men will be run out of Oklahoma City. The women will stay in Ann Arbor, and both will participate in RowFest in Oklahoma City on July 12th. And we are hoping that that's going to be an international component. We are working with a couple other federations, similar to the U19 Worlds Canamax layer. We are looking to establish a under 23 Worlds, then international level for that next tier of athletes who just missed going to selection camp. Okay. Para, so our high performance director for para rowing, Ellen Minster, sent me this information. So they are going to be running a dev camp. A lot of this is TBD because this is not happening until just before Canadian Henley. It will run from July 29th to August 3rd out of Boston, Massachusetts, and then go and race at the Canadian Henley that's in St. Catharines, Ontario, that same weekend. So we're excited to be offering that and more dates to that. We're going to be finalizing all the camp fees by April 1st. We'll definitely be announcing stuff a lot earlier than April 1st. That's the absolute latest. But again, that camp is not going to be starting until late July. Okay. Great. So this is for our U19 team, U23 and non-Olympic senior worlds are going to be happening in St. Catharines, Ontario. I've got some information about trials here. I mentioned July 5th through 7th in West Windsor, New Jersey. That's Mercer. For those of you that don't know that, Mercer Lake. Those are the events that will be up for grabs. There will be time standards associated with these, and we'll get more into that on our specific U19 and U23 webinar. Just so everyone knows, it's 95% of world's best time is what you don't need to just win the trial. You also need to hit that percentage of world's best time in order to then represent us in one of those events. But what's great about the Mega World Summer is that if you qualify, great, you're going to Worlds. If not, you still have an opportunity if you've received an invite for selection camp. All right, last couple slides. We're getting there, and I know we're getting short on time. But for next steps, I'm gonna sound like a broken record. I feel like I need a song. Go to your athlete profile. This is required for all of our camp applications. You log into the member portal, you hit edit profile, you go to athlete profile, you enter all of your athlete metrics, you hit submit and update it regularly. You can update it as often as you like. As you get those new scores, like that should be the process. PR, login, update. I mentioned follow-up webinars. We've scheduled the first two, December 20th. We're going to run two of the same webinar in order to accommodate our West Coast athletes and participants. So we're going to run the same webinar. Chris and I will be on 8 p.m. Eastern and 7 p.m. Pacific time. So 8 p.m. Eastern and 7 p.m. Pacific, which will be 10 p.m. Eastern. That webinar is already available for registration. Go for it. Log in. We want to see you back here on December 20th. For the under 23 group and the collegiate space, that will be January 17th. And similar, we will run two different slots to accommodate for both East Coast and West Coast. TBD, specific to coaches. We mentioned the high performance clubs, and of course for para as well. We will be scheduling those as well. Okay.
Well, that was it more or less for now. I want to thank everybody, all the athletes and all people involved in taking part in this webinar, because this is where we build the future of rowing in the US.
Thank you, Yosi. All right, Chris, we got 3 minutes. I see there are several questions. Do you feel you can prioritize the ones that are going to, knowing what our demographics were from that poll, what can we answer for people?
Okay.
And I am willing to go a minute or two over. I'm willing.
Well, here's what I would say. Number one, you should reach out to Brett or I or both. That's something, it's basically our first and last name with a dot between it at USRowing.org. Number two, coxswains have a lot of questions because they're very shy. I would say that for many of the questions, whether they're coxswain orientated or not, we are doing another webinar coming up, as Brett has already said, and we will continue to look through the questions. We'll continue to get information, whether it be about Canamex, date and location. Somebody just asked, is the straightforward going to be a trials boat again, and so on. Like, these are all things that hopefully we answer tonight, but also that we will answer in the next webinar. Brett, you want to just repeat the date of the next webinar?
December 20th for U19.
Yep. So,
yep.
If you want to send us questions in advance, a lot of the questions right now, Brett, I think we've had over 50 questions. I think a lot. Yeah, we should be putting together a frequently asked questions page for you, and we will certainly cover it by December. On December 20th. Coxswains, you will have opportunities at every camp. There will be programming for you at every camp. And so we hope to continue to find ways to help you improve as well. Athletes, Brett, a lot of the questions are specific. How many numbers? For instance, at SDC, at Selection Development Camp, 45 males and 45 females. At Selection Camp, Brett, what did we decide we were going to take?
30, we're doing 35 for each gender,
Yep.
with the option to potentially, graduate some from selection development. I think we have, do we say 2 to 3 maximum per gender? So that, the most that we can take would probably be 38 per gender. Mm-hmm.
And so other than that, I would encourage you all to keep sending, whether they're questions about TCP, training center partner designation, whether it's about coxswains, whether it's about how many, just keep sending them to Brett and I, and we will start collecting all of the questions and put them into an FAQ. We will also have the answers for you on December 20th.
Yep. And this will also be recorded. And, as I mentioned, it's for recording. It'll be posted. Someone asked a question you said about the straight four. I believe it was listed on that trials. It was only on there for a second, but yes, it is a trial event, the men's straight four for U19. Okay. Well, we are right at 9 o'clock. And I know there were still a lot of questions. And yes, Chris. I saw
Let me
you.
say one thing, everybody, we are not 100% clear on youth development camp starting date. What we're trying to do is have the boys and the girls camp be at the same time so that they run alongside each other instead of start to, back end to end. If we do that, then obviously we don't have to rush it right after youth nationals, and there's no rush. People can still go to Row Fest. So we will have an answer on December 20th to clear that. So for the questions that were just answered or were just asked.
Great. And I want to point out that part of the reason why Chris and I are holding these webinars is to hold ourselves accountable. There were definitely moments where like, is November 15th too early to be having a webinar? It's like, we have a lot of information. There was a lot of information in this presentation. We want to make sure we're getting it to people, and we're going to be transparent about the information we don't have and when it will be coming. So December 20th is probably the next big deadline. The only thing before that was that I do plan to have the U19 ID camp dates and final locations posted by December 1st. Okay, well, I think we're going to go ahead and end it there. Thank you all so much for this. It was one of our best attended webinars. It shows that there is an interest. It shows that there is passion in this country for the Pathways program. And Chris and I are so excited to be working on this with all of you and to continue to build it and offer everything that we need to develop as many athletes as we can to go to all different levels, but really to just stay involved in rowing for as long as possible. That is goal number one. Stay with the sport, and we want to make sure that we have things that are appropriate for your stage of development. Chris, any final thoughts?
It's exciting to see so many people into this early in the process, and that tells us that you also want answers earlier. We're trying to get things much earlier this year and constantly evolve. There's always changes, but we're trying to evolve the system to work better and better every year. And I think that's just a microcosm of how we look at the athletes as well. So thanks you all for coming.